So hello guys, today I am going to start one of the very important topic which I was requested by lot of people to start the web services automation framework and web services concepts, right? Because nowadays web services testing is a very important in any industry, right? Because every applications which we make, right, and the job which we do through UI, right, same task we can do through web services API, right? So if you'll take any example of any networking applications like Facebook, Twitter, every every networking sites, they provide us the exposed API, and through that API we can do the same job. Through the API we can see the number of tweets, we can get the number of retweets, right? Even in Facebook, when we post the photo, right, same things we can do through the API. So API testing is very important nowadays, and almost all the company is started with API testing, right? And it's very hot in market. If you know the API testing, if you know the API automations, your demand is very high, right? And second thing is, now the trends are changing in the industry. Now earlier how it was, we had three segment. One is manual test engineer, automation test engineer, and performance test engineer, right? Now the things are changing, right? Now industry wants a single person who will do all the job, who will do manual, who will do automations, who will do performance, right? So based on the demand, based on the needs, even we need to educate ourselves, because things are changing very fast. Now no more difference between the tester and development engineer, right? So even we need to prepare for that, so that we'll be up to date, and we will follow the market. Otherwise we'll lag behind and we'll be saturated, right? So before to start web services, right, introductions, web services uses, this is brief about me. Okay, this is brief about my background. I come from mechanical engineering background and I am from Bihar. This is my Facebook page. If you like my Facebook page, you will get all the updates, all the video which I make. And this is my playlist where I update all my core Java, as well as Selenium video, as well as whatever I will make for the web services, right? I'll update to this location, right? So you can go through my playlist, right? So today I will start with web services, and today I made one PPT, right? I made one PPT. I'll go with my PPT, right? So we will discuss about web services concepts and API testing, right? Then slowly we will go with the framework, and then I will show you how to execute the web services tests and how to do the API testing, right? So we will go one by one, right? So today agenda is, I will cover about what is web services, what is HTTP, what is HTTP client methods, what is JSON, what is URI, what is request, what is response, and what is POJO class. So these are the topics, these are the major topics which I need to cover it in web services automations. Apart from that, we have lot more which we need to cover, right? So when I will go one by one, you will come to know everything, right? And try to remember all this, because this is very important from interview point of view. Because wherever you will go for the interview, first they will start with all basic questions, and then they will go into automation framework for web services, right? Now we will talk about, yes, apart from this, apart from POJO classes, you have three more. What is HTTP status code, right? What is SOAP, and what is REST, right? So now this is the list item which I'll be discussing in my coming video, right? So these things, just you need to remember it, like what are the things actually we are going to do into web services testing, right? Now we will talk about what happens when we do web services testing, right? This web services testing, basically, first of all we'll talk about what is web services. That is very important, because a lot of people, they will jump directly to start the automating API, but they will not be aware what is web services. So web services is nothing but exposed API to the users, to the clients, right? So web services is nothing but exposed API to the market, to the customers, to the client, right? Through that, client can perform the task, through that client can perform the same task what they do through UI, right? Because what happens is, whenever we perform any task on the UI, in backend, if you look at, all services call will go to the server, right? All services call will go to the server, and server will give you the response, right? So that is web services. Web services is nothing but it's just exposed API to the customer, right? To the market, and in another word, it is exposed API by one applications which can be consumed by some other applications. That is nothing but web services, right? It is nothing but exposed API which is given by one applications that will be consumed by another applications, right? Now we will talk about how this web services works, right? So what happens is, we have something called client and server, right? We have something called client and server. Assume that my system is a client. And I have one server. Right? So what happens is, when we send any request to the server, right? When we send, if you look at here we are sending request to the server. So when we send request to the server will return a response to the client, right? So whenever we send any request to the server will return a response to the client. So since I am talking about RESTful API, right? So when we send a request, it is nothing but the exchange of data between two medium, right? When we send a request, right, it is nothing but exchange of data between two medium, right? And this exchange of data, this data can be of type JSON, XML or text, because this RESTful web services supports any kind of data. It can be JSON, it can be XML, it can be text, right? It can be HTML, right? It supports all type of data. So whenever there is a communication between client and server, right, when we send a request, so this request is nothing but a HTTP request, right? When we send a request, it will go as a HTTP request, and when we receive a response, again this response will be nothing but HTTP response, right? When we get a response will be nothing but HTTP response. So assume that we sent a HTTP request and the data type is JSON or the data type is XML to the server, right? And server send us the response. This response not necessarily will be of same type what we are requesting it, right? So when we get a response, it is not necessarily to be same type what we are sending as a request. Assume that we are sending request as a XML. Assume that we are sending request to the server as XML, but the response can be JSON. Response can be JSON, can be text. Response can be JSON, can be text. So again, the response comes from the server. It depends on the what client will consume, right? If my client will consume response as XML, server will give me a response as XML. If my client will consume response as a JSON, server will give me JSON. If my client will consume response as a text, server will give me response as a text. Alright? So I think hope this is clear for you guys how this client server works and how web services work, how request goes as HTTP request to the server and server will return the response as HTTP response. And again this response depends on the type of data client will consume, right? If I am sending JSON request, not necessarily I will get JSON as a response, or when I am sending XML as a request, not necessarily I will get XML as a response. It's completely depends on the client, what client data will consume, right? Hope this is clear for you guys. Now I will go for another topic, right? What is HTTP? It's a very important question. What is HTTP? That is nothing but hypertext transfer protocol. HTTP is nothing but hypertext transfer protocol. So there are few things we need to understand here, right? There are few things we need to understand here. When we send data from one medium to another medium, right? When we post data or when we send data from one medium to another medium, from from client to server, right? There should be some medium, there should be some a channel through which we can transfer the data from one medium to another medium, right? Directly we cannot transfer, there should be some medium, right? To do that either we can use HTTP client. Either we can use HTTP client or we can use REST assured, right? Either we can use HTTP client or REST assured. So both are basically is nothing but it's a third party library or a medium, you can say that, through which we can transfer the data from one network to another network, right? We can transfer the data from one network to another network. So here I will discuss about few HTTP client methods, right? Like how this method is used to transfer the data from one medium to another medium, right? Because when we say it as a client can be my system, can be my server, can be my VM, depends. And server can be anything, it can be some other big system, can be cloud system, right? So when we transfer a data over from one network to another network, we need to have the medium, and this medium is nothing but it can be HTTP client, it can be REST assured, right? So when we send a request from client to server, right? When we send a request from client to server, right, it will go as a HTTP request, and when we get a response, it will come as a HTTP response, right? Now we will talk about little bit more on HTTP client methods. So this HTTP client has lot of methods, right? It has lot of methods, but here I will talk about only 4 major methods which we mostly use, right? We will talk about 4 major methods which we mostly used, namely HTTP delete, HTTP post, HTTP get and HTTP put, right? These 4 methods are mainly used. If you look at here HTTP client method, it comes under package org.apache package HTTP. Inside the HTTP package we have package called client. Inside the client package we have methods, and then we have a class called HTTP delete. Similarly for HTTP post, it comes under the package org apache HTTP client methods, and then we have something called HTTP post. Similarly we have HTTP get and HTTP put, right? So this we need to understand why we have multiple methods, right? Why we have multiple methods? Why not single method? Because every method has different work, right? Every method has different functionality, right? To do that, to perform the different task, on server side, we have different method. We have HTTP delete, HTTP post, HTTP get and HTTP put, right? Namely, generally we call as a put, get, post, right? Put, get, post and delete. These 4 methods are mostly used in the industry, Apart from that, you have lot more methods, but these four methods are mostly used in the industry. So even when you go for the interview, you say that I have worked only on post, get, put and delete, right? Now we need to understand here one thing. When we transfer data from one client, from one network to other network, or from client to server, right? When we transfer data from client to server, right, we have to transfer the data in the form of object, right? We have to transfer the data in form of object, right? In the form of object. So HTTP client has lot of basically classes. It has lot of classes. If you look at here I have made the object of HTTP get, right? In a get you have something called URI. Again you have HTTP post. In post you have, I'm making the HTTP post as an object and supplying as a URI. Now you have HTTP put and you have an object of HTTP put. Then you have HTTP delete and object of HTTP delete, and I'm supplying an URI. I will talk about the URI in my next slide. Here we need to concentrate on HTTP methods. So these four methods, try to remember it. You have HTTP get, HTTP post, HTTP put and HTTP delete, right? So here I am making the object of all the classes. So whenever we make object, which means it is a class, right? So on this we need to concentrate, because in interview they will ask you how to push the data to the server. You have to say that we need to make the object of HTTP post and we need to supply the URI, right? This URI I will talk in details in my next slide. Now as I told, when I transfer data from client to server, it will go as a HTTP request protocol, right? It will go as HTTP request, and when response comes from server to client, it will come as HTTP response. So basically, what is HTTP, hypertext transfer protocol? What does mean? What does mean hypertext transfer protocol? Hypertext transfer protocol is nothing but it's a structured text, right? It is nothing but it's a structured text, and one text has the links of other text, right? Hypertext is nothing but one text has a link of other text. That is called hypertext transfer, right? One text has a link of other text. Here you can see that I have this one paragraph. Here this my text has a link of this text, and this text has a link of this text. This is nothing but hypertext, right? Now I'll go to my next slide. This is very important. This is very important. See, when RESTful API exchange the data, when RESTful API exchange the data from client to server or server to client, right? Because we send a request to the client server and we get a response to the client. So when we exchange the data can be of type JSON, XML, text, HTML. Here I will focus more on JSON because JSON is widely used in any organization. JSON is widely used in any organizations. So if you look at JSON is nothing but it's a key value pair, right? I took one simple dummy JSON. JSON is nothing but key value pair. So here if you look at, your key is type and value is object. Again this is type and value is object. Again you have a key is equal to properties and value is equal to in curly braces foo, right? Curly braces foo, right? This is your value. Again inside this curly braces you have foo is equal to key and value is equal to full type string. Again inside this curly braces you have key is equal to type and value is equal to string, right? So if you look at whole things, this properties is a key, and this entire things which comes inside this curly braces is a value for properties. Similarly, if you go inside, this foo is a key and entire things type is equal to string is a value. So JSON is nothing but key value pair. Again here bar is a key and value is equal to curly braces type is equal to integer. This is value. Again if you will go inside this curly braces, your type is a key and value is an integer. Similarly here badge is a key, value is equal to curly braces type boolean. Again if you will go inside, type is a key and value is a boolean. So JSON is nothing but it's a pair of key value, right? It's a key value pair that is called JSON. Now in previous video I was speaking about URI, right? I was speaking about URI. This URI is nothing but uniform resource identifier, right? This URI is nothing but uniform resource identifier. Now I will go back. If you look at here, everywhere I was supplying the URI. So this URI is nothing but, right? This URI is nothing but uniform resource identifier. What does mean? What does mean by uniform resource identifier? See, when we make any call, get call or post call or put call or delete call, right? We need to supply the URI. You need to supply the URI of the API. You need to supply the uniform resource identifier. Why we need to supply this? Why we need to supply this? Because any API has URI, right? Otherwise, without URI, we cannot perform task for a particular API, because when we say get, right, get has different URI, get has different uniform resource identifier. When we say put has different resource identifier, post has different uniform resource identifier. Because to identify all the API uniquely, we need to have the URI, right? We need to have the URI. This you will understand more once I will start the framework, and once I will start the coding part, you will understand more. For time being, I will try to explain you what is URI. Now, assume that you have something called www.google.com, right? You will have something called google.com. So after this, if you look at some GRI RD something, right? Basically when we do a get call, right? So when we are doing a get call, see this particular URI is getting appended, right? Uniform resource identifier, which means in backend get call will happen, right? In backend get call will happen. Similarly, when we do some search here, test, right? What happens is, if you look at here, see q is equal to test. This URI is getting changed. So this test is nothing but search, right? So for every call we will have URI, so that server will identify what actions we want to perform. So for the search, see, your URI is getting changed. See, q is equal to test, right? Because you are searching test in a Google. So this is nothing but your URI, uniform resource identifier. This I will discuss more in details, right? So what happens is, whenever we make a call, get call, right, we basically supply a URL which we want to get. In a URL we supply some parameter, right? In URL we supply some parameter. Assume that I want to get district in country India of state Bihar, right? I want to get a district in country India of state Bihar. How I will supply? I will supply that first constant URL, that will be for our country India. After that I will supply slash Bihar slash district, right? I will supply slash Bihar slash district. That will give me all the districts in a country, right? So that is nothing but your URI. So whenever I am posting the URI with a get call, right, it will identify internally to which method to be called, because when we supply any URL, right, that URL, the pattern which we supply, basically in the backend code, if you look at, right, every method has that resource URL, right? Every method has that resource URL, and based on that URL pattern, your method will get called. So when we supply something called /district, right, if you look at the REST method, you will have something called /district in the backend, and based on that your district will get called. Anyways, I will show you so that you'll understand more. I have one of the example, right? I will show you how this is useful to understand URI more. Just a minute, my Eclipse is getting launched. I will show you. So here if you look at, not this, yeah, so if you look at here, you will have something called /countries. So this is nothing but your URI. So your starting URL will be fixed, something called http localhost 8080, and if you do /countries, right, if you do /countries, this particular method will get called. When you will supply /country/id, this method will get called. When you will supply /country/details, this method will get called. When you will supply /country/update/details, this method will get called. So this is nothing but in the URL, when we supply this kind of URL pattern, particular method will get called. So this is the benefit, right? Hope this is clear for you guys. And anyways, this code I did today because just to explain you how this URI and all that works. Now, to test any web services, you have two things. Either you can go with a SOAP or you can go with the REST, right? So the full form of SOAP is Simple Object Access Protocol. That is nothing but SOAP. So earlier people were using more SOAP, right? Earlier people were using more SOAP, but nowadays people shifting towards REST, because REST is a stateless, it's fast, and REST consumes any kind of data. With the SOAP, the limitation is SOAP consumes only XML data, right? It consumes only XML data, whereas REST consumes JSON, XML, text, HTML. It contains any kind of data, right? And REST is architecture. Basically, it's architecture, right? Whereas SOAP is a object access protocol, right? So here our main aim is to learn more about REST API, RESTful web services, right? And to understand more. Now, HTTP protocol. HTTP has following methods. HTTP has get, HTTP has put, post and delete, that I have already discussed when I was talking about HTTP client methods. But these are the HTTP methods: get, put, post and delete. It has lot more methods, but we will mainly focus on get, put, post and delete, right? So try to remember this full form of REST and SOAP. In interview they will ask you, what is the difference, what is the advantage, disadvantage. You can say that SOAP consumes only XML, whereas REST consumes JSON, XML, text, then it consumes HTML, right? REST is stateless, right? There is no state, right? And in a REST, the data returned by the server, it depends on the client what data will consume, right? Not necessarily when we are sending request as a JSON, your response will get as a JSON. It can be XML also, it can be text also, depends on the what data client will consume, right? Now we will talk about what are the HTTP status codes. So whenever we exchange the data over one network to other network, right, server will send us the response and status code. Mainly response has status code, right? Response has a status code. So every status code has some meaning. Every status code has some meaning. When you get a status code as a 200, when we get a status code as a 200, which means request is okay. When we will get 201, which means the data got created or data got posted to the server. When you will get 204, which means there is no content. When you are trying to get something and when data is not available, you will get 204. When you will get 400, which means bad request is not proper, right? When you will get 400, bad request is not proper. Either JSON is wrong or URI is wrong or header is wrong. It can be many things. When you will get 401, it's unauthorized. You are not authorized to perform this task. When you will get 401, 404, which means not found. The particular page is not found. You will get 404. 409, when there is a conflict, right? When there is a conflict, you will get 409. And what is 500? 500 is whenever there is an internal server. Whenever there is an internal server, you will get 500. This internal server may be of the data which you are supplying is not proper, or server is not responding, or the payload which is wrong. You'll get 500. So don't worry about this status code. Just try to remember this, because this is very important from interview point of view. And this all status code I will show you once I will start doing the coding, and once I will start with the framework. You'll come to know one by one what I am trying to say. As of now, just try to remember this, just try to understand this, because this is very important from interview point of view. Now is nothing but thank you, right? So watch this video at least 2-3 times. It has a lot of concepts, and this concept is very mandatory, because when we will go for the interview, they will ask you first the concepts, and then they will ask you your framework, how you do testing, how you automate everything, right? So thank you for watching this video. Hope you like this video. Please, if you like this video, please click like button, subscribe my channel, okay? And you can post any message to my Facebook page, and I will reply you with the minimum time. I will take minimum time to reply you, right? Thanks once again. Thank you for watching.